Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis. We're here. We're excited. We're a little later than usual, Landis, but it's because you were out gathering information. We're going to talk about the latest that was heard at Ohio State on Wednesday as it relates to the national championship game. We'll catch up on Notre Dame in a similar way on Thursday's show. But then we're also going to get away from the national championship game, Bill, and we're going to look forward to 2025. And we're just going to pick 5 Northern teams that have not yet made this version of the playoff and say, aha, who's got next in the North? So that means we're not picking Michigan. We're not picking Washington. We're not picking Ohio State or Oregon or Penn State or Indiana or Notre Dame. But everybody else is on the board. And we're going to explain why we think they've got next in the playoffs, Bill. Because guess what? There's going to be a bunch of Northern teams in next year, too.
There will be. So I don't know your 5. You got a peek at mine. Are we hive mind on this, or is there some differences?
What do you think? Do we share a brand or do we not share a brand?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I got a haircut yesterday. Did you get a haircut yesterday?
I'm getting a haircut tomorrow.
Okay. So that's about it. We're not exactly the same, but we're constantly right in the right range with each other. So we got Jason in the chat guessing team names. We'll see. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. And sometimes, like if you're watching on YouTube right now, are the banners a clue? Maybe they are. Maybe Doug just wanted to show some love to some other random teams. But so that's coming. And guess what we're going to do at the end? Whatcha watching, what you eating, what you thinking. I went to a movie on Tuesday night just so I had something to talk about on this show, Bill. I live my life. The only purpose I have in my life is coming up with things to talk about for Whatcha.
Yeah, it is funny how much that occupies my thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, got to make sure you have something for Whatcha. So I've been watching something on Netflix I want to talk about.
Yeah. It's like, what you thinking about? I'm thinking about Whatcha. That is,
yeah.
it's
truly
a self-fulfilling prophecy. So thanks to everybody who's here live on YouTube, the diehards of the diehards who found us at a weird time. We're going to go from about 1:45 Eastern to 3:15 Eastern. We'll give you that regular 90 minute plus show. You were out at Ohio State today.
Yeah.
The playoff is running it this way. It's just a different world. But I think the playoff's doing a good job of having live/Zoom required player and coach availabilities. And then when you get to the site, you get to talk to them there. But like in a bowl, you're at the site talking to people for 5 days. So you and I are going to get to Atlanta on Friday. We're going to have a big media day on Saturday where you get like everybody on each team available. You'll have a coaches news conference Sunday morning and the game on Monday night. But what was the big discussion topic as Ryan Day and some Ohio State players were available on Wednesday?
Two things. Obviously a lot of respect for Notre Dame and familiarity. It was pointed out to Ryan Day that, and I think people know this, right, that you have an odd situation here where you have a non-conference matchup that is happening for the 3rd straight season. Ohio State hosted Notre Dame to start the 2022 season. Ohio State played in South Bend. I think it was in week 4 last year, and now they're playing here on a neutral field in the national championship. Ohio State won both regular season meetings. So there's respect that is born out of the familiarity. I think both those games were tight games. The rosters, I have actually gone through. We'll do this before the game to see like how many guys in this game have how many snaps they've played against either team. I think is interesting. The one thing that really caught my ear, because I don't know how often you hear a player talk about an opponent this way, but Josh Fryer, the starting right tackle for Ohio State, said that he thinks Notre Dame is the toughest team in the country. And normally you hear a player say, like, we're the toughest team in the country. And I don't think he was trying to short sell his teammates or anything like that. I think he was just trying to say what the view is on this Notre Dame team. There's a lot of talk about toughness. There's a lot of talk about resiliency, like all the things we've said about Notre Dame throughout the year.
Yeah.
So
maybe he listens. You think Fryer listens to the show? It's like
he's from Indiana. He is of the North. He might listen to Kings of the North. So there's a common refrain, I think, for Ohio State that really started on Sunday when we spoke to Ryan Day for the first time and has carried through a couple of other media availabilities with the Buckeyes, at least, that is like they know this is a game where they can't beat themselves because of how well coached Notre Dame is. And Notre Dame thrives on turnovers, and they find edges, and they play really hard. So there's a lot of that coming from the Ohio State side of this as it gets ready to head to Atlanta.
I think everybody would agree, even if there's Notre Dame fans watching or listening, that Ohio State has a higher ceiling, and that's not an offense to anybody.
Yeah.
It's a matter of, does this become a ceiling game or does this become a grind game? And Notre Dame plays a lot of grind games.
Mm-hmm.
And Ohio State played 2 ceiling games against Tennessee and Oregon, and then played a grind game against Texas. And I think we believed, and I would imagine Ohio State itself believed, that Ohio State winning a game like that against Texas was invaluable. It showed them something. It showed Notre Dame something, right? Has that been a vibe at all that, like, hey, the Texas win for Ohio State wasn't perfect, but figuring something out and fighting to win mattered?
I think so. Yeah. Like finding a way is just like not always been the strong point, I think, of some Ryan Day coach teams when you're playing a game of, we talked about, like, a game of that magnitude against a team that good. Funnily enough, though, because I would say both the games that Ohio State won against Notre Dame, especially the second one, were grinded out games. So, like, not only does Ohio State have this experience of doing it in the playoff against Texas, a lot of guys on this team have experience doing it against Notre Dame, like in the not too distant past too. So I do think it matters.
All right, you want to play a little Bill Answers trivia?
Sure.
Okay, let's do this. After Michigan, what opponent for Ohio State could and would bring out a toughness conversation the most?
Notre Dame.
Of any opponent in the country.
Yeah.
Based on how they play, recent history, familiarity, style, all that stuff. All right. Part B. Is a game built around the toughness conversation a good thing for Ohio State?
I would say no, but I don't know that I'm picking up on similar vibes for this one. Like, I've been in enough build-ups to Ohio State games where the toughness thing did dominate the conversation in a way that I did not feel like was good for Ohio State. I don't know that I feel that right now, but I get what you're saying, because my answer to that would be no.
So it's one of these things where it's like, what is it that has been the issue for Ohio State in the Michigan game? Is it just the winged helmets? Is it the maize and blue? Or is it stylistically? Michigan has a way they want to play, and they have been able to force, bait, trick, cajole Ohio State into playing Michigan's way for much of the last 4 years. And probably the team in the country most like Michigan, most like last year's Michigan, is Notre Dame. And so now, so is it for Ohio State? Is it that if you play a team that is centered on toughness, that you can be tricked, cajoled, forced into a toughness game with them? Or is it just about Michigan? Is it because it's the rivalry? So I am not saying Ohio State can't do this, but Ohio State is at the moment like a 10 out of 10 on everything. And the only thing they're not a 10 out of 10 on, and the history is not that far away, is like how they go about trying to play their best against Michigan. And if Notre Dame has any ability to create that atmosphere, that's an edge for Notre Dame. But are you saying you don't think that's what is happening here, can be happening here because it's not the rivalry, or Ohio State won't allow it to happen because they've maybe learned from past mistakes?
I think it's the last part. I don't think Ohio State's in that headspace. I do think it is primarily a Michigan conversation. I believe that other teams could perhaps lure Ohio State into a similar line of thinking, and I think Notre Dame has done that, or at least Lou Holtz did it last year, right? But I
never heard Ryan Day never said, "Where's Lloyd Carr?"
Yeah.
Right. I mean, right. Who has specifically lured Ryan Day to the toughness conversation the most in his career is the former Notre Dame coach.
Right. So I believe Lou Holtz did an interview with the Columbus Dispatch, and he did pick Notre Dame. So maybe that's enough.
Not a surprise
for Ryan Day to be baited into it again. I don't think that's where Ohio State's mind is. And there's been a tell, I think, too, in the past, because Ryan Day was asked a version of this question on Wednesday. And in the past, Ryan Day has said things along the lines of like, this is going to be a slugfest. We know this is going to be a 4-quarter game. Like, we're going to have to grind this one out. It's like, it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy when they finally got on the field with the way that he talked about it during the week. He didn't say that today. I think that there was, an acknowledgement that it could happen because Notre Dame's good and Ohio State's good, and they both have very good defenses, and Notre Dame wants to run the ball and slow it down, so it could become a grind. But I don't have the direct quote, but Ryan Day said something along the lines of like, well, we can control if it gets to that point, which is, I think, is a way of saying like, it ain't going to be that if we run out 21-0 like we did against Tennessee, right? So I thought the way he answered that and the way that they're operating are very different from the previous iterations of this conversation we've had for 3 years now.
It's all, everybody learns from everything, right? And it's just, how long does it take you to learn? How do you learn? Are you a visual learner? Are you the other kind of learner? I don't know what everyone talks about being a visual learner. What's the other kind of learner? Audio learner? I hear stuff. I don't know. What's the
experiential? I don't know.
Experiential. So Ohio State has a whole bunch of experiential learning in this, because again, this is one of those where that far away from Notre Dame winning the last game against Ohio State.
Maybe an 11th defender. Maybe an 11th defender.
Yeah. Well, and also, by the way, who's an experiential learner in this circumstance? Marcus Freeman against Ohio State. Like, all the credit in the world. Listen, this is the thing about this, is like, all the credit in the world to Ryan Day and the Ohio State coaching staff and Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame coaching staff for the way that they have handled these teams this season. They both have things not that far away where people are like, what are you doing? And there's only so many things that you and I are capable of thinking at one time, Landis, so I don't want to give everything away. I think I'm saving this for later, but Ohio State and Notre Dame have the two single worst losses in college football this season. One because of the opponent, of how good you're supposed to be, and you lost to a mediocre MAC team. And the other because you're a nearly 3-touchdown favorite against your rival, the game you have to win. It's at the end of the year and you can't do it. And so they both have hit as low as you can hit. And the responses, Notre Dame's response is longer, but Ohio State's might be even more impressive. The responses to those losses by those two teams, I think, has everybody in like, I'll line up behind that guy. Give me that team.
Yeah.
Those guys are tough. Those guys are resilient. Those guys found a way. They have great leadership. The players play hard. Everybody's bought in. So I think you and I talked about that story of Notre Dame year long, because it was since September. It's like, man, they got something here. And Ohio State's is shorter, but you would watch Ohio State the last 3 games and say, man, they got something here. So we have 2 got something here teams, but I don't know that they don't want to play this game the exact same way.
They do not. I think there is some confidence though that Ohio State can play it either way. Because I don't think why would Notre Dame believe that it could play in a track meet with Ohio State? Why would anybody believe that they could play in a track meet with Ohio State? So like, Ohio State can win it that way, but I think this Texas game and the Notre Dame games from the past 2 years, as I've said, I don't think Ohio State would prefer to play in a game like that, because your margin for error diminishes pretty tremendously. But I think there is confidence that it could win that way. I think maybe that is the starkest difference between the two teams, is that Ohio State has the ability to be both, and I don't know that Notre Dame does.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. Lorenzo Styles talked on Wednesday. Is that correct?
Yeah, he did.
So this is one of those where, for people who were around in 2005, and that was my first season covering college football, the Ohio State Notre Dame Fiesta Bowl, the whole thing was that Brady Quinn's sister was dating A.J. Hawk. Brady Quinn, the Notre Dame quarterback, A.J. Hawk, the Ohio State linebacker. They're married. They have a family now, but she was wearing a split Notre Dame Ohio State jersey.
They are married? I wasn't sure if that relationship persisted.
Now
I believe you.
I don't want to get something wrong and then be on McAfee. All right. Can't believe that guy didn't know AJ Hawk's marital status.
They're not
Personal
married.
life. Oh, no, he is. Are they no longer married? Now we're talking about things we shouldn't talk about. Hawk is married to Laura Hawk, the sister of former NFL quarterback Brady Quinn.
Oh,
they have been married since 2007 and have 4 children.
You are correct.
Am I right?
Yep.
McAfee's going to take McAfee's going to headbutt me. Of all the people, I'll have media wars with plenty of people. I don't want to accidentally stumble into a media war with Pat McAfee. If I do it with purpose, fine. But like to accidentally be like,
I don't know. Big
well,
platform.
you know more about AJ's life. I don't want to do that.
Don't underestimate it.
Okay, I'll do it. All right. Hey, maybe I don't. No, I don't want to get that wrong. I'm glad they have a lovely family. She's lovely, but that was a whole thing. The Styles family needed a split Notre Dame, Ohio State jersey, and then set the Notre Dame side on fire. So the people who know this, the dad of both Lorenzo and Sonny Styles, Lorenzo Sr., played at Ohio State. Lorenzo Jr. went to Notre Dame, was a receiver there. Sonny is at Ohio State. Lorenzo, when Ohio State and Notre Dame played in the shoe in 2022, Lorenzo Styles caught the first pass of the game and broke a tackle and went 65 yards. And then he transferred to Ohio State, is now a defensive back at Ohio State. So this is a crazy thing for Lorenzo Styles Jr. to have to talk about.
It is. It was very funny. He sat down and the first question was like, so what do you think of the fact that you've played for both these teams? And he said, clearly I've chosen good schools. Just like, yeah, you have. It's like you can
Can't argue.
Do a lot worse than Notre Dame and Ohio State. He said his girlfriend still goes to Notre Dame, and they've had long conversations about which team she's going to cheer for, and his expectation is that she is going to cheer for Ohio State. Okay, the two most interesting football things I think were one, when he left Notre Dame, he said he had a really long conversation with Al Golden, the Notre Dame defensive coordinator, about staying in South Bend and moving to defense. He decided to come to Ohio State and move to defense. But it did sound like there was at least a moment maybe where he was considering just playing corner for the Irish, which if he did, maybe he'd be in a huge spot right now with some of the injuries that Notre Dame has had. He's like a sub package player for Ohio State as a dime back. He was an offensive player for Notre Dame for 2 years, but Mike Denbrock was not the offensive coordinator when he was there. Yeah. So he said last year he got asked a ton of questions about Notre Dame's offense before that game, but this year he said not so much because he doesn't have as much inside information with the new offensive coordinator.
Okay. All right. What else from OSU? Josh Fryer, right tackle, said they were tough. Anybody else? Stuff that really popped?
He did say they were tough. No, not a ton. Will Howard fell on that 4th down run against Texas. He said Chip Kelly called him one-legged Willie, which I thought was hilarious. Carnell Tate said they give Will Howard crap all the time because he never used to fall when he played for Kansas State, and now he's playing for Ohio State and he can't keep his feet underneath him whenever he's running the football. So I thought that was quite funny. So no, it's a lot of the same stuff about Notre Dame and its resiliency. Carnell Tate, the receiver for Ohio State, did say that he's expecting at least Notre Dame, and this will be a huge thing we talk about in the big game breakdown when we do it this weekend. He's expecting Notre Dame to kind of dance with the date that got them here, which is they play a ton of man coverage. They play a lot of single high, and there's been an ongoing conversation. I know I've seen it on social media about how exactly is Notre Dame going to play this? Are they going to deviate from that? Do they trust their guys to cover Ohio State's receivers one-on-one? Tate said they thought Texas was going to try to cover them one-on-one, and then they didn't. So that was a bit unexpected. He said that they didn't really anticipate them kind of cheating toward Jeremiah Smith as much as they did in that game. And that is, I think, the Ohio State offense versus Notre Dame defense matchup, that is the biggest lingering question: is how will Notre Dame treat Jeremiah Smith? How much will Notre Dame deviate from what has been its fastball this year, because it plays more man coverage and more single high coverages than just about anybody else in the country.
Ben Morrison, their first round level NFL corner at Notre Dame, has been hurt for months. He probably in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s career did the best job of covering Marvin Harrison Jr. that anybody did in the 2023 game in South Bend. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's right.
If he was healthy, this would be fascinating to be okay, I did it against Marvin Harrison Jr. Now can he do it against Jeremiah Smith. Instead, they're going to have two young corners, Christian Gray and Leonard Moore, including a true freshman in Leonard Moore. And they have played very well, and we'll get into this in the big game breakdown, they haven't seen a receiving core like this, right? Like, that is indisputable.
The closest things would probably be USC and Louisville, and those two teams also stand out as like the only two offenses that did much of anything against Notre Dame's defense.
Yeah. USC probably the best comparison. This feels like it could be one of those where what's the story is Al Golden had 9 days to prepare for this and created a whole new defense. And they come out and
on
do
the table. Yeah.
Something they've never done, because as much as they believe in their guys, just doing the same thing against this firepower maybe is not the best plan of attack. So roll the dice and let's shake it up, which occasionally you see with teams, right? I mean, that was a big thing. We talked about that a ton when it happened, when you and I went to the Pitt-Syracuse game on a Thursday night in the middle of this year, and Pitt picked off Syracuse 5 times. The Pitt defenders we talked to afterwards, because they had extra time, because they had a bye week into a Thursday, so they had like 10 days of prep. They're like, we changed our whole defense. And it's like, what happened? They forced Kyle McCord into the worst game of his career. So is this enough time? I don't know. 9 days? Maybe it's enough time, Landis.
I think it's enough time. It was interesting to me that Chip Kelly, when the Ohio State's coordinator, spoke on Tuesday. Chip Kelly said like it was very complimentary of Al Golden, and said, Al Golden's got an NFL background. You see a lot of that on tape with Notre Dame, because even though, like, you can say like Notre Dame plays a ton of cover one, but it's like, that's true, but there's a lot of variations off of that. So it's not like they just do one thing all the time. But the other thing that Chip Kelly said is it's like they're pretty veteran on the back end of their defense, I guess, with the exception of Leonard Moore, who's a true freshman. So I think if Al Golden wanted to change things up, there's probably enough football IQ, banked reps, experience that those guys could actually deploy it. Like, if you can have all the ideas in the world, if your players don't know what they're doing, then like you're gonna put yourself in trouble. But maybe there's enough there with sort of like Xavier Watts on the back end, kind of making everybody feel comfortable, the corners playing the way they're playing, that they could change things up rather significantly.
Yeah. I'm intrigued. Okay. We have a lot more to talk about. Here's the rough plan. Today's Wednesday. Thursday at noon, how Notre Dame and Ohio State got here. We're going to have like tent poles. These are the key moments, whether years ago in sort of the formation of this team, or things that happened in recruiting, or things during this season. We'll each have 10 things for each team that's like, this is what you need to know of how these national championship teams were created. I think that's going to be fun, Landis. You think that's going to be fun?
I think it is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Then guess what we're doing on Friday? Did I tell you the special guest on Friday is officially in? He's officially in. Our guy's coming on. Mike Kadick, Indiana center. Indiana lost twice this year. Once to Ohio State and once to Notre Dame. So we are going to get Notre Dame and Ohio State defensive scouting reports from Mike Kadick. We're going to talk about the conversation around Indiana this year, like, hey, you don't belong in the play. It's like, hey, look at us. What's your year? Bro, what's your year? What'd you do? What'd you do this year? What'd you do? We beat everybody except the two teams in the national championship game. Suck on that, SEC. Suck on that. I shouldn't say that. We've copyrighted cram it. I can't be saying suck on that. We'll bring back in 3, 2, cram that. So we'll have Mike on to talk about all those things, what he thinks about the future of Indiana football. But really, it's scouting report time with Mike Kadick on that Friday show. We'll also have T-Shoe on to talk about betting the national championship game on the Friday show. And I just feel like, not to be a ding-dong about it, but probably of all the head coaches in college football, the two guys that I probably have the best feel for are Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman. So I'm going to talk a little bit sort of about them. And I sort of have a theory of the case about Marcus Freeman and his Ohio State roots, and Ryan Day and how he got to Ohio State and what's happened. And I will present my theory of the case about those two coaches on Friday, because you're going to be driving.
We'll be on the way, hopefully in Atlanta by the time that show starts, but we'll see.
So maybe you'll be on, but if you're not, then it's just I have a plan to blab. Then probably Saturday evening or Saturday afternoon, maybe we got to figure it. No, it's gonna be Saturday afternoon. We think we're gonna go 2:00 Saturday, 1:00 Sunday, and Monday. Right? Is that what we officially sketched out?
Yeah, I think we want to try to get the Saturday and Sunday shows out to people before the NFL games are on.
Yeah.
And plus I want to watch the Birds on Sunday.
Yeah, you do. So Saturday, of course you do. So Saturday is going to be reacting to media day Saturday morning. Sunday will be the big game breakdown where we will break down both sides of the ball and make our picks. And then Monday will be like a last sweep. And maybe we'll just do a bunch of media interviews on Monday and get other media people's thoughts on this. Maybe getting some fights. I don't know.
Yeah, we can do that. I actually was wondering that. Like, it's the national title game, right? So everyone's going to go. But what are all the Southern honks going to talk about while they're there?
I don't know, but I'm going to take my sword and poke them with it.
Okay.
So maybe we'll have fights. We might have fights. And the other thing would be, and I love it, there's nothing people love more than us planning the show live on the show. Do we want to do a meetup? Do we want to do a KOTN meetup of some sort? Low key, but maybe say meet us at this section of the parking lot Monday before the game at this time. Could we do something like that?
I mean, we can have our persons there. Yeah, we can. Like, we don't have anything to give people.
We don't have anything,
or like an ability to do a show there or anything like that. But if you want to come say hi, I would gladly do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think at the very least, it's literally the least we could do. Yeah. We're gonna stand. We'll tell you where we'll be standing, and then we'll take a photo. That's the bottom line. We'll take a group. We'll take a northern photo because this is just going to be a big northern blanket that we're going to wrap around the South. How cozy is that going to be? Maybe we'll even get a couple dogs in there by accident. Oh, come in here, little dogs. I have a dog thing to talk about in What You Thinking that's pretty crazy. Wait till you hear it. All right. We're not going to take a break yet because we're going to talk about first the our 7 teams that have made the playoff in the last 2 years. Michigan, Washington, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, and like what we think of them. This is like, we talk about them a lot because they're so good. So we want to give most of our time here to other teams in the future, but let's do rapid fire through this, Landis. Okay. Like sort of what we think of the playoff futures of these established playoff teams. Michigan. Our buddy John has been pointing out like Michigan's getting work done in the portal. They probably have Mikey Keene ready to start at quarterback next year. Bryce Underwood is learning under him. Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator, is interviewing for some NFL jobs. We don't know which way that's going to go, but they've made an offensive coordinator change. I think Michigan's going to be right back in the playoff mix forever. The way they have things lined up, I'm going to think of them as a playoff contender until I'm told not to, because I'm going to think about them. I'm not going to be weighed down by what happened this year with a quarterback situation that never got worked out and probably the wrong guy as the OC. Is that where you will be with Michigan?
I think mostly I think they're going to have like one more year of a pushback to that.
Okay.
That maybe like really hits the ground running, presumably with Bryce Underwood ready to take over as the starter full-time heading into 2026. Like they're losing obviously some very key components of this roster. They've done a nice job in the portal, but I don't know if they're all the way there yet for me to say they're definitely going to be back in that mix 100% next year.
Crazy September. They're at Oklahoma and at Nebraska in September. Again, it's like no break for Michigan. Just like, the conversation 2 years ago as they were winning it all was like, oh, they're scheduled. And it's like this season's schedule was just a banger and they're getting right back to it again. So, and then they're at USC in early October. Their first 3 road games in the first 7 weeks of the year are Oklahoma, Nebraska, USC. That's just blue blood central, brother.
Not bad. Yeah. Couple great helmet games in there.
Yeah, for real. Washington. Damon Williams is the quarterback. They're getting some work done. They got an Arizona guy in the portal that was a big deal. They have to get their offensive line this year was kind of an issue, but Denzel Boston's staying, our guy. Like I think Jed Fish might be getting his feet under him with the Huskies.
So I had a preliminary list that had Washington on it. I took them off. Because maybe there's still a little bit work. You can do a whole lot worse than Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, sure, quarterback, running back, receiver going into the year. I think they're off. They added a couple offensive line guys. Ryan Walters as defensive coordinator, I think, is interesting, and like defensive transfers, they've done a nice job. So I think you see it again. Maybe I feel similarly about Washington than I do the Michigan. Maybe not this year, 2 years down the road. I think maybe they're kind of right back on the track, pushing towards that. But I did consider putting them in for our list for the exercise we're going to do here in a bit.
Okay. Indiana, Fernando Mendoza in the portal, I think has a chance to be as impactful as any 1 year transfer quarterback. And I'll include Carson Beck to Miami in that. It's a crazy thing to expect Indiana to do what they did again, but I don't think they're going anywhere. And I've said previously that I think we understand what the top tier of the Big Ten is. I think Indiana can be in the second tier. And if you're in the second tier of the Big Ten, that means when you peak, that peak goes up into playoff contention. I think if you're in the top tier in the Big Ten, that's sort of like, well, you kind of should be a playoff contender almost every year. And that tier is probably Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan when it's got its feet back under them. But I'd put Indiana in that second tier, and I don't think they're going away, and I'm super intrigued to see what Mendoza's like there.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I'm intrigued by Mendoza. I think like Curt Cignetti is going to get tested here because UCLA came and poached Tino Sunseri. I saw some reporting today that Penn State might try to poach Brian Haynes, their defensive coordinator. So Sig is a great head coach, but he's also had very good assistants.
Yep.
And every great head coach has to be able to fill those spots. So that'll be a test of Cignetti's ability to do that. But I think they have a really good handle on how to build their roster too. So I think they have staying power in that second tier. The thing that's hard with the Big Ten, I guess it's true of every league now with the unbalanced schedules. It's like it's going to depend on what kind of breaks you get, right? If Indiana gets a year where they have Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan on the schedule, it's like okay, probably not the year. But if it's a year like last year where they only end up getting one or two of those teams, then absolutely they'll be able to elevate.
Yeah, schedule mattered. I certainly took. Well, we're each going to do our 5 teams if we think who's next. I certainly took schedule into account. Did you?
Yeah, I definitely did. Yeah.
Because there's some paths. Because it just matters. It mattered for Indiana. I think it mattered a little bit for Penn State. It doesn't mean that you don't deserve it, but it's the same in every sport. It's the same in the NFL. Like schedule matters. And because you are viewed a certain way, and it's just like, we understand it. So it's not a shot to say, like, we looked at your schedule and like that affected how we viewed you. Let's go to Penn State while we're talking about it. We can do this more later. I'm kind of mad that the North has already lost 2 defensive coordinators because the South doesn't know how to find coaches. So Corey Heatherman from Minnesota to Miami and Tom Allen from Penn State to Clemson as defensive coordinator hires. So when I was at Notre Dame, Penn State, that semifinal, the day we had availability with the coordinators, I asked the other 3 coordinators, Al Golden and Mike Denbrock at Notre Dame and Andy Koltelnicki at Penn State, about this North-South stuff. And I did not ask Tom Allen, and I thought like I actually should ask Tom Allen the most because he's been at Ole Miss, but I kind of like didn't get to him. And maybe I could have swayed him, Bill. Maybe he could have been like, you know what? I was going to take the Clemson job, but you have me so fired up about the North. You've changed my view of the North's ability to compete. I'm staying. I blew it. Why did I do it?
I've seen Penn State circles blaming you for this, so I'm glad that you're taking responsibility. I don't know. I found that move to be quite odd because I think it's at best a lateral move. Let me double check real quick.
Was Clemson in the semis this year? Were they in the national semis? They were not? Okay.
Nate Bauer, who covers Penn State for On 3, said like Tom Allen's got family down in the Carolinas. Maybe that was why he did this. I don't know.
You know what that family could do? Move to the North. Move to the North, family.
Doesn't he have Dabo energy though? Like this feels like a hand in glove situation.
I don't know. I don't mean to be mad about it, but I am. I'm mad.
You know what? Why wouldn't you be?
Yeah. Everybody at Penn State stand. We talked about it with Dan Wetzel yesterday. Like this, do you agree with this? Michigan, what Michigan did in 23, what Ohio State did in 24, Penn State's going to try to do in 25. Amari Evans is in the transfer portal. Sal Wormley, the right guard, said he's going pro. Trey Wallace left is in the portal too. Oh, because it's like one of those things. It's like, hey, the current receivers aren't good enough. Let's bring in new receivers. And then it's like, well, then the current receivers are like, we're leaving. And then it's like, okay, well, the reason we brought in new receivers is because the current receivers weren't good enough. So that's not. I don't like. No offense to those guys, but like whatever happens. But So last year, Ohio State lost Marvin Harrison Jr. and Mike Hall. So I think like this is equivalent of that. Abdul Carter goes pro. Sal Wormley goes pro. But Nick Dawkins, the center, also announced he's staying, just like Katron Allen and Nick Singleton and Drew Aller, 2 running backs and a quarterback, just like Denai Dennis Sutton on the defensive line. They're running it back, and they're going to be on the path next year that Ohio State and Michigan have been on the previous 2 years.
I think so. Yeah. It's a heck of a situation for James Franklin to put himself in, by the way.
But what? But
what's he supposed to do otherwise? He's not supposed to. Yeah,
but we can't do this again. We're not even done with this year. We cannot start applying the Ryan Day or else theory of the case to James Franklin. Like, well, all these guys are coming back if James Franklin doesn't win a national title.
I'm not saying that I am. I'm just saying that everybody else will.
I know we have to be on alert. We have to be on alert to bat that down because it's not fair. Because how can you do better than this year? Well, only 2 things you can do: make the natty or win the natty. Yeah. So like the opportunity that is there, but I saw some other people talking about this with Penn State. It's like this semifinal run like activated their NIL. So this is proof of concept. So like this is all good. I think Penn State's here to stay. And I think if we believe the 12-team playoff was built for Penn State, I think this season elevated Penn State. I think Penn State's going to be in the playoff mix every single year. That doesn't mean make the playoff every year, but have that as a reasonable goal and be right there in the discussion. At least 8 out of 10 years. That's how I view Penn State now.
That is how I view Penn State. And to the point of their NIL being activated, I remember talking to some people in Indianapolis who around the Big Ten championship, but at that time they said, like, I don't think Penn State's going to be able to afford to keep both Nick Singleton and Katron Allen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that was definitely the vibe.
Yeah.
Oregon, they added a bunch of dudes. Like Oregon's, I'll be curious. A lot of potential around Dante Moore. They really have gotten some high-level quarterback play the last 3 years, 2 of Bo Nix and 1 of Dylan Gabriel from the portal, especially Bo Nix. Like Bo Nix at Oregon was different than the Auburn Bo Nix, and that's a credit to Bo Nix. It's also a credit to Oregon for like making him better. But I'm super curious if they are able to continue that elite level of quarterback play, and then everything else. I just think they're at the point now that there's no reason to doubt their ability to fill in every gap with recruiting and the transfer portal. And I think their high school recruiting is only going to get better because they really have been great in the portal with the way they've plugged holes. But I don't know. I mean, Oregon, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 years in the playoff mix, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I did find it a little, I guess I was a little curious about, like, there was some smoke with Oregon and transfer quarterbacks. I don't know anyone ever actually visited, but like Quinn Ewers announced today that he's going to the draft. But I heard a little bit of like, might Quinn Ewers go to Oregon? And it's like, it's hard to tell anymore. Is that like a team like Oregon's always going to do its due diligence, even if it does believe in Dante Moore? Is that agents throwing out Oregon to up the price, or is that Oregon doesn't believe in Dante Moore? Like, I'm not sure which way to read that. So they got to get quarterback right with a transfer for the 3rd year in a row, which is always I think a bit of a roll of the dice, but yeah, otherwise I think they have staying power, no doubt.
This Quinn Ewers news was interesting because wasn't there at least half an eyebrow raised about the idea of Quinn Ewers at Oregon, Ohio State, and Notre Dame? That Ohio State has Julian Sayin lined up, Notre Dame has CJ Carr lined up, Oregon has Dante Moore lined up. But if you can get a 5th-year guy who's been a 3-year starter and let that young guy have 1 more year, is Quinn Ewers too good to pass up? I at least saw in the On3 story about Quinn Ewers going pro. I think the names of all 3 of those programs appeared as, there was some speculation that he could have landed at those places.
Right. I think what I said about Oregon specifically would apply to the other 2 situations too. It's like I don't think you want to be immediately dismissive of the notion of the potential of adding somebody like Quinn Ewers. I don't know that any of those 3 programs would be near willing to pay what it would take to get Quinn Ewers when they already have they have the quarterback.
Yeah. And then Notre Dame and Ohio State, both pretty good. You think they'll make the playoff again some year?
I do. I bet they make the playoff again next year.
Look at you. God, such a homer for the North. Oh, I think Ohio State and Notre Dame were good. I will say I'm already, I don't know if I look to be preemptively mad. It just comes naturally to me, whatever. But there was some other place that did like, it was a headline that was like playoff dark horses for 2025. And I just like clicked on it to see who they listed. and they did list 2 of the northern teams that we're about to discuss, but like every other team they put in there was the South. And I was just like, why is it when there's an article like this, like there's 7 teams from the South and 2 from the North?
Yeah.
Are we not learning?
Texas Tech in there. A lot of Baylor in there.
A lot of Auburn. I'll take your Auburn.
Yeah.
You know where to put your Auburn. Yeah. My God. All right. So that's the baseline of the teams that have already done it and whether they can do it again. When we come back, who's got next in the North on KOTN? Back on Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Humbled. We're going at a different time. People weren't expecting it, and our live audience is already up to what we usually have and more. And so, like, just again, thanks to everybody out there who chooses to be a part of this. Who's got next? We're trying to actually predict it. So what we are saying is we have 28 northern teams that we consider our own. And I bet you a lot of you guys can name them by now. I think you can. 7 of those 28.
Should we make a song? Like people, there's like a song to remember the state capitals. I remember from Animaniacs. We should have a KOTN song to help us remember the 28 schools.
Adding it to the list. Oh my God. A little like this land was made for you and me kind of stuff. Definitely folk vibes. That's how my wife knows all the states. I don't know all the states for crap because I don't know the song. But let's learn. I mean, what's more important? Like if you have like a 3rd grader and it's like, Mommy and Daddy, I want to learn all the states. And they're like, first, we want you to learn all the KOTN schools because sometimes Cincinnati's hard to remember. And don't forget Boston College. Bump, 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 bump. From Colorado to West Virginia, from Minnesota to Cincinnati, from Washington to BYU. KOTN is made for you and me. Oh, I should have said me and you because it would have rhymed better. All right, that's a first pass. First pass. I didn't know you were going to have me write a song live on the air. Number 1 on your Who's Got Next. Who you got, Landis?
Probably the same team you have, Illinois.
We're going to his house. We're going to his house. Brett, if you're watching, come in the comments. Brett, if you're watching. Do you think people are going to get on the Illinois bandwagon between now and the start of next year? Because, Mike, you can also show Doug's teams. Illinois is also number 1. We are united in this.
I do. I think it's easy to see, like, when people start looking at the returning production stuff, Illinois will be very high up there. The personality element of Brett Bielema, I think, will draw people to that team because national writers are just want to go to Champaign and sit in Brett Bielema's office and have him say funny things to them. So I think there'll be some momentum behind this, and the schedule, like, really, I think sets up quite nicely for this to be a year for them. I mean, they just won 10 games, right? So it's not like we're talking. Can you get 11? Can you become 11-1 and make the playoff rather than finish 10-2? But I think this year they can because they don't have to go on the road twice to play Penn State and Oregon.
Well, they were 9-3, right? Because if they were 10-2, they would have been.
They were 9-3. Yeah, 9-3.
Because they had the two big losses to Oregon and Penn State, like big in terms of like they're the playoff teams, and they had like the tight Minnesota loss. And if they didn't have that, I think they would have been in. So I think with this schedule, it's manageable, but I also think 10-2 Illinois is very much in the mix for a playoff spot. Their big non-conference is at Duke.
Mm-hmm.
They don't play Oregon, Ohio State. No, they don't play Oregon, Penn State, or Michigan. They get Ohio State at home, right?
Yep.
No Oregon, no Penn State, no Michigan. They get Ohio State at home. They go to Washington. They go to Wisconsin. They go to Indiana. But you can brush past this and think to yourself, the only games they should lose is to Ohio State.
That's how I kind of viewed it. Yeah. There's just
like,
so
whatever
much
that means.
There's just
and listen, like they're playing, like Washington might be really good next year. Wisconsin might be really good next year. Doesn't mean they're gimmies, but it's not like you would look and say, well, I don't know how they're going to do it. So the schedule helps. Like most reports, Jeremy Warner, again, at Illinois, 24/7 Illinois writer, is great to follow for this kind of stuff. Like 16 starters, roughly, I think is the thing that the rough guess of who
18,
they have it.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
it depends on, I think, because there was a situation in the bowl game, in their Citrus Bowl game, one of their starting offensive linemen transferred. So was it Brendan Johnson, the guy who caught the touchdown pass against Nebraska, started in the bowl game? So then it's like, well, now they have all 5 offensive line starters coming back if you just go based off the bowl game.
Okay.
So I think depending on how you want to couch it, you could say I think as many as 18 starters back.
2 tackles, J.C. Davis and Melvin Priestley, the guys that Brett Bielema got in the portal a year ago, are both going to be back. Losing receiver production led by Pat Bryant, who was awesome, but they have 2 receivers in the portal. Justin Bowick, am I saying it right? Do you know, from Ball State?
I believe that's right, yeah.
6'4", big body guy, and then Hudson Clement from WVU, from West Virginia, who's like a productive guy. And so losing Pat Bryant really hurts. They had multiple guys in the backfield, including Caden Fagan, who got hurt, but like Aiden Lockery and
top 6 ball carriers are all back.
Like just they had a lot of guys. They had a lot of guys towed it, and they're all back. And then Luke Altmaier is back. And then like Xavier Scott's back on defense. Like they've lost a couple guys on defense, but a bunch of their defense is back. It's just a lot of returning production from a 9-3 team that had a good bowl win. And I think Brett Bielema's built something there. And I was completely wrong about it coming into this year, but I think it is a replicable model that I can see people starting to buy into Illinois. Players, transfer players, and recruits, donors. If you are an Illinois fan, I think Brett Bielema and that staff are giving you reason to want to contribute right now. And so even if it doesn't happen right away, Bill, I think they are not, like, if they don't do it this year, I don't think like, oh, well, that's it. Like that, I don't know that this clearly, I think, is going to have a chance to be a peak for them, but I don't think it's a now or else. I think Illinois might have something sustainable. I think Aaron Henry improved as a defensive coordinator this year. Barry Lunning, like, I think he likes his staff, and I don't know if they're going anywhere. I think it's now and later for the Illini.
Yeah, I thought it was huge to keep Aaron Henry. I saw his name pop up a few times as teams were looking to fill defensive coordinator slots. I think there's something here. There was a quote that I read from Brett Bielema. I'm not sure when he said it. I'm assuming it was after their bowl game win, where I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect of like, he respects the past of Illinois and its history, and that is like, the seasons where they have spiked, like, Red Grange, that kind of stuff. But doesn't
Juice
want
Williams.
Juice Williams, like doesn't want the past. Yeah, more recently Juice Williams.
Yeah.
But they won like his first year there, they won 9 games or 10 games, didn't they? But there's a lot of losing in there too. And like, he doesn't want that to hold them back. Like, he doesn't, I think he's trying to get Illinois and its donors and its administration and its fan base to like shake off the, history of losing that the program has had to endure as it tries to build itself for this new version of college football. And it seems like he believes they have everything they need there. And this season, I think this past season that just ended was a tremendous step in that direction. But the 2025 season, I think, has a chance to be like a real catalyst for that with everything they have coming back. I was looking through the PFFs, like just snap counts. 16 players played 200 snaps on defense. 11 of them are back. That's a lot. The only thing they're really remaking on defense is a defensive line, and even that being said, they still have Gabe Akis back, like, who's one of the better pass rushers in the Big Ten. So like, it's not like they're totally rebuilding there. I think they need to hit a receiver, but otherwise, they probably have just about everything else they need to continue to take a step forward.
Bielema's second year was good. First year in 21 was 5-7, then 8-5, 8-5 in 2022, 5-7 in 2023, 10-3 this year. First double-digit win season for Illinois since 2001. So like, that's what we're talking about, how good this year was for Illinois. Now in between, there's a 9-win Rose Bowl season in there too, and they beat Ohio State, but 7. But like, this has a chance to be something. We will look forward to talking about the Illini this offseason, but there's like experience and talent back and a manageable schedule and a coach that you believe in. Really, that's all we're doing here, right? Experience and talent,
Yep.
schedule, coach. What else is there?
That's it. Vibes.
Everybody can start vibes. Start your own podcast. That's all it is. That's all this is.
Yeah.
Just get a chart. There's all kinds of charts out there now. People are making charts, doing stats all over the place. Who's your number 2 team?
Kansas State.
Kansas State. They are also on my list. Where are they on my list? They are also, let's see, also number 2.
I don't think we'll have
Dylan,
identical lists.
No, it's close. Dylan Edwards, to be losing DJ Giddens is a huge loss at running back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be sitting around in May on my back porch with my feet up saying, who am I going to pick to win the Heisman? Avery Johnson or Dylan Edwards? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Am I going to pick the Kansas State quarterback or the Kansas State running back? Because Dylan Edwards is electric. He was their number 2 kind of alternate back this year, Colorado transfer, balled out in the bowl game. Landis, I have to stop myself from doing this. I got sucked in by first-year starting quarterbacks this year because I was trying to figure out who the next Bryce Young or CJ Stroud's going to be. And it feels like that's not where the sport is right now. Find veteran quarterbacks with some snaps under them. But Avery Johnson's going to be a veteran quarterback next year now. He's not going to be a first-year starter. They also have Jace Brown back at receiver, which really matters. And they're filling in on defense. They have Gabe Powers, I think, that the Ohio State transfer has a chance to be pretty good at linebacker for them. And I think Chris Kleiman is pretty good at this. There's a lot there, man.
I was thinking as I was looking through stuff, I was like, well, I don't know. Can Dylan Edwards is kind of little. Can he really be Kansas State's number 1 running back? And I was like, oh, Kansas State, the program that had Darren Sproles.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think he'll be okay. Deuce Vaughn, he wasn't a monster either. They've actually Dylan Edwards, I think, more fits the mold than DJ Giddens of some of the best Kansas State backs you've seen. So Avery Johnson is a quarterback. I don't think I'm going to be able to quit until he's done playing college football, even though he has a lot to work on clearly, but he's also still pretty young. This was his first season as a starter as a true sophomore. So he's got, time to develop and clearly there are some tools there. O-line's a question, but they have experience, but they have a couple guys that have started back, just not always full-time starters. I think the defense will still be pretty good. They don't have Brendan Mott's gone, but I think their pass rush will still be all right. I don't know. You and I think both Kansas State quite a bit coming into this past season, and it felt like at times we were going to be rewarded for that, and they just couldn't quite stay consistent. And maybe that's their biggest hurdle now going into this year is finding that. But Chris Kleiman can coach, and Avery Johnson's got a lot of skill, and I think Dylan Edwards is a real dude, and he can build from there. I think a pretty compelling season.
I think they're pretty good. They have a lot back at the defensive line and linebacker. Lost some stuff in the secondary, but added Gunnar Maldonado in the secondary from Arizona, which we've talked about previously. That really matters. Again, Jace Brown back as their number 1 receiver. And then they added Jaron Bradley, who's the 6'5" guy who, when I went to spring football at Boston College, I was like, who is that? And then he had 9 catches this year. But I still think there's something in there. Maybe I could see him making an impact. Non-conference is Army and Arizona. Again, Arizona and Kansas State are in the same conference now, but when they scheduled these games, they weren't in the same conference. So those are winnable games. And then they have road trips to Kansas and Utah. But I think it's doable. And I think it was a big deal. The whole thing, again, the people who cover Kansas State fans know this. They had just not won on the road at all. Mm-hmm. And they won at Colorado this year it was a game that I think got that program over the hump in a lot of ways. And then late in the year, they didn't have enough to hang on. But I think they learned a lot of lessons. And I think the failures of this year will help them next year. And then all this means, Landis, is that the Iowa State-Kansas State game in Ireland on August 23rd is incredibly consequential because it is the beginning of Kansas State's playoff push. Mm-hmm. So we got to go.
I think we'll probably be there.
So Farmageddon is going to be a banger, and it's super going to matter. So this is your number 2 team. This is my number 2 team. And I do think I had said we would do a threshold of Are you more of an Indiana team that is, oh my God, you made it, and the miracle is making the playoff, but there's not necessarily an expectation of winning playoff games? Or are you more than that? Or are you more on the Notre Dame, Penn State track, Ohio State track? Certainly what Oregon was, didn't quite get there because they had to play Ohio State. Of like, you could make the semis. I think you could get in and win too. So I think those are the two categories, is just getting in the story, or can you get in and win a game or two? I would put Illinois and Kansas State on I think they could get in and win a game or two, because I think Illinois is going to be good enough in the trenches on both sides of the ball, have some playmakers on defense, and Luke Altmaier is a veteran quarterback. And I don't want to play Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards in a playoff game. So I would elevate both these teams.
I think I could probably get there with both these teams. I was thinking of really everyone sort of along the lines of like, boy, wouldn't it be something if he just got in? I do think the equation is different for Big 12 teams because that league, I think, just is going to be a little more wide open year after year, right? So maybe it's not like a team like Kansas State, I think, can enter this season with reasonable expectations of making the playoff because of the league they're in. Even Illinois, given how much it has back, like, is still in the Big 10. But I think both, to me, especially Illinois, have the makeup of a team that could win a game when it got there. Yeah.
All right, who's 3 on your list?
BYU.
Let me check my list real quick. Just let me go check my list real quick here, Bill. Doug's list: 1, 2, 3. BYU is 3 on my list also.
Yeah,
this is fun.
This is
fight.
I wonder we'll differ. I did change my list around some, but these 3 teams are on every version of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, a good coach.
Yep.
Good quarterback. Good everything else. Like I like it's like schedule again. It's like it is a little hard to play the schedule game, I think, in the Big 12 sometimes. BYU, I guess, only gets 4 home conference games, which is kind of weird. I think I have that right, but I don't know. I think they can be as competitive in the league as they were this past season because of what all they have coming back. And I think Kalani Sitake's a really good coach.
I think like they feel good about, like, they didn't lose a ton in the portal. They've added some important guys in the portal. Carson Ryan, the tight end from Utah, Keanu Tanavasa, the defensive end from Utah, Andrew Gentry, offensive lineman from Michigan, might wind up starting for them. Texas defensive end. So they have some guys that can help them. I don't think they've lost a ton that way. Tyler Batty up front, Jacob Robinson in the secondary, 2 guys they'll really miss. But I think
Jack Kelly's back though, right?
Jack Kelly's back. And then on offense, Jake Retzloff back at quarterback, LJ Martin back at running back, Chase Rogers back at receiver. And maybe there's some places where we're on hold with the junior college ruling, with Diego Pavia suing to say my junior college playing should not count against my eligibility. And there's been a ruling that's like, okay, it doesn't count. Darius Lassiter, their other really good receiver, under that rule might have a year of eligibility that he could take, that otherwise you thought he was out. So I think there's still some decisions being made on that.
Hinkley Rapati too, the other running back, is
the other running back. Yeah. So, and I think there's a lot of, do you believe in table setting years? Because I think what we're looking at here, Illinois, Kansas State, and BYU all did great things this year, and it wasn't quite at the playoff level. But it feels like lessons learned that should apply. And BYU is closer than anybody. BYU, beginning of November, we were picking them to make the playoff. But I think especially, again, the energy coming off their bowl win over Colorado, I think this program is really, again, and we had doubts about it moving to the Big 12. It's like headed in the right direction. I don't know like why this would vanish. I think they know what they're doing.
I think table setting years definitely exist. I think BYU having the start that it did and putting itself in position to play games of consequence in November, and then frankly, like, not winning them, but kind of missing its opportunity a little bit, but then returning so much from that, where you sort of like live with that disappointment. You understand now what it takes, I think, to win in those big games in November. I think that positions them quite well for this season. If they had gone through that and then or we're resetting their roster significantly, then I don't know really how valuable that is. At least maybe it's valuable 2-3 years down the road, but I don't think it'd be valuable this year to this group of players. But I think that the combination of who's coming back, what they went through last year, will have them fairly battle tested. And like they were a team that was on like the razor's edge for a lot of last season, and maybe that will be a quality of them again in 2025. I don't know, but my hunch is maybe it won't be because of how veteran they will be at some key spots and the fact that they went through a lot of that last year.
I think they could do something too. I don't think this has to be a just get in situation for BYU.
If they get O-line right, I think that's right. They got to replace both tackles. Again, another team that has quite a few guys who have started, but just not a lot of full-time returning starters. And I also thought I was pretty certain when the Utah State job opened that Jay Hill was going to get that job, and it went to Bronco Mendenhall instead, which was a great hire, I think, for Utah State. But I think keeping Jay Hill as defensive coordinator was huge for BYU.
I was looking stuff up. Do you know, like I wasn't paying as much attention to everybody in the North a couple of years ago. You know who went to Utah State? Do you know this? Jordan Love. Did you know Jordan Love was from Utah State, the Green Bay quarterback? I knew that.
Yeah.
Should I not admit that kind of thing live on a show that I don't know where Jordan Love went to college?
It was so long ago.
I care about Utah State more than I did when Jordan Love got drafted. Number 4, who you got?
Number 4 for me is Nebraska.
Finally a change. Finally something different. Because I had Nebraska 5. Okay. Great for us. But there's still, we have, so 4 of our top 5 are the same. We do have one team different. Nebraska. So this is, I felt like the number 1 team maybe in the country that people are always like, oh, they're so overrated. The media loves them in the preseason poll. And you look at the end of the year and they're not that, was Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame had sort of carried that for the past 10 years. And now Notre Dame is in the national championship game. I think maybe there has a chance to be now with Nebraska, as much as Nebraska is like just climbing back to bowl eligibility for the first time since 2016 was a huge thing. I think we're on the precipice of Nebraska becoming the most overrated team in college football, but also I like them. So I don't want to be afraid of whatever, having the wrong take. And we'll replay this in November and be like, remember when Bill and Doug said that Nebraska is one of the next 5 teams up in the North? But it almost pulled me back from the edge here. But then I was some talent in the portal, and year 2 of Dylan Raiola could be pretty good.
I mean, it was in my head too. Like I said, I went through a couple of different versions of this, and the first couple didn't have Nebraska on it.
Okay.
I think we discussed at the time. Like I was unenthused, I think, by the staff decisions that Matt Rule made. Especially John Butler, a defensive coordinator. I just thought maybe he could have taken a bigger swing there. So I don't find myself like super excited about the coaching brain trust, I guess, going into this season. They clearly had to do something at offensive coordinator, and Dana Holgerson's probably better than what they had last year. It's mostly just like second year Dylan Raiola. I think Dane Key's a very good receiver. Like to get Dylan Raiola, that kind of weapon is nice.
He's a guy from Kentucky, right?
From Kentucky. Transfer? I think he was the top transfer portal receiver on most sites, if I'm not mistaken. They're going to have a lot of portal guys hit, which is not always a guarantee. But I guess I'm taking a swing.
Pedigree. They have some pedigree.
Yeah.
Or like 5
especially
stars
defense,
who maybe were a little iffy in college, but like holy moly. Right?
Yeah, Williams Winery, the defensive lineman from Missouri, who was a number 1 player in his recruiting class, overall player in his recruiting class 2 cycles ago. Deshaun McCullough was a very highly rated player, like outside linebacker, edge kind of type. Like, yes,
Elijah,
high ceilings.
Elijah Pritchett from Alabama, who's been a starting lineman at Alabama, is almost certainly going to be a starting tackle for Nebraska. Some big potential here.
I thought, I think so. And I'm maybe it's dangerous to assume that it'll hit, but maybe this is more like a 2022 was it or 2021 Michigan State kind of situation where like it all just kind of comes together very nicely.
Okay.
And I actually think for as much as we discussed it feeling like there was a bit of a window opened for Nebraska this past season because of the schedule, I look at this schedule and kind of think the same thing. They have to play Michigan and they have to play at Penn State.
Yes.
But I think there's 9-10 wins there for this team if their transfers hit, and perhaps more than
And
that.
that's
'Cause
just,
I don't really know what to make of Michigan.
So they got to, I mean, like you got to get to 10. So
Yeah, you got to get to 10.
if they could get, I mean, this feels like maybe a be there game. September 20th, Michigan at Nebraska. That maybe feels like a be there, a KOTN be there game. I think that has a chance to be, again, especially if Michigan looks like they're back. If Michigan goes and wins at Oklahoma in week 2, now we're talking about week 4. And Nebraska's big non-conference is a neutral site game against Cincinnati and Kansas City that originally was scheduled for Indy. It's been moved to Kansas City. So they have that Michigan game early, and they have the Penn State trip late on November 22nd. And then everything else in there is like, again, I think it's almost unsaid. I think there's going to be a healthy middle of the Big Ten. And maybe they all beat each other up. But you could look at Nebraska and say, I think they at least have a chance in all these. And I don't think they don't have a chance against Michigan at Penn State in late November. If Penn State's like, we came back for this and we're rolling, could be really tough. But, if Nebraska only has 1 loss going into that, so they have 7 home games, 4 away games, and the neutral site game in Kansas City. And their road trips in the Big Ten include, besides Penn State, the other 3 are Maryland, Minnesota, and UCLA. So underestimate Minnesota at your own risk, but like just on the face of it, it's not like they're going to Oregon. It's not like they're going to the Horseshoe. Right. So the schedule matters for them here.
I think I could see an Indiana situation where maybe Nebraska could beat Michigan earlier in the year because those 2 teams aren't fully formed yet, and it's like Nebraska rolls through the year, and the only blemish in the regular season is maybe they go to Penn State and get crushed late in the season. But
yeah,
that would still get you into the playoff if history is any indication.
So maybe more of an Indiana path here. Maybe not exactly expecting Nebraska to jump from their first bowl in 8 years to a playoff win or 2, but like getting in. Huh. And if they could somehow get in, this would be a lot to ask. But they'd be the 8 seed. You want a playoff game in Lincoln? Anybody up for that? Anybody up for a playoff game in Lincoln?
Be pretty electric.
So also, let's let Husker Nation go to Ole Miss, invade that place. Like people are up for. You know what? We know what happens when you don't go to a bowl for 8 years. People save their money. There's a lot of IRAs in Nebraska teeming with bowl trip cash. So it might be time to empty that account and go to Nebraska at LSU or something. Let's do that. All right. I'm going to give you, that was my 5. It was your 4. I'm going to give you my 4. And this is my Indiana. This is my what? I can't believe they made it. Year-long discussion of how good they might actually be. And it's Michigan State. Okay. Year 2 of Jonathan Smith. They kept great freshman receiver Nick Marsh. They added 4 other portal receivers and a true freshman in Braylon Collier who might be pretty good. So they want to give Aiden Childs weapons. Some bumps along the way for Aiden Childs in his first year as a starter, second year as a college football player in 2024, might be ready to do something. They've added some portal guys on the offensive line, including Connor Moore from Montana State at right tackle, who I think was like a guy people wanted. They added a Wake Forest kid on the offensive line. This is tough because like the schedule doesn't quite fit as much because they play Michigan and Penn State.
Yeah.
And you're going to find out fast because after their non-conference, they get Boston College at home is their big non-conference game. Also might be a be there game for Kings of the North. Boston College in East Lansing. They go to USC and to Nebraska as their first 2 Big Ten games, both on the road, USC and Nebraska. And so we're going to find out. So if we're talking about how good Nebraska might be and Michigan State has to go there, and then they're also playing Michigan and Penn State, now you got to win a game that maybe people aren't expecting. So maybe they're not Indiana. Maybe this is a terrible choice. But I'm trying to figure out like a big leap, like no table set. They're 5-7.
There's no table. Yeah.
You might
have like the table cover. Let's just like kind of sitting there waiting for a table, but there was no table set.
There was no table.
Yeah.
So sometimes you buy the table and invite everybody over and they show up and it all happens in one day. So if Michigan State can go from 5 wins to 10, then this is the story. But I think we like the coach. I think we like the potential of the quarterback. We really liked freshman receiver Nick Marsh this year. I like what they've done on the offensive line in the portal. They lost both their backs, so they got to replace that there, but they might have some internal guys there. Jack Velling's back at tight end. But I could just and when you look at it, Kurt Cignetti himself was such an important part of Indiana. I could see people being like, man, that Jonathan Smith can coach. Because they were saying stuff like that at Oregon State, and then this was just an adjustment year in year one. So am I too far out over my skis with the Spartans here?
You know, I didn't consider them. I think it's a tough ask to get 10 wins out of that schedule. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I think it's mostly that I was expecting to see a little more from Aiden Childs last year. So maybe that development arc is a little longer than I was anticipating. Still, you know, I'm not deviating from he's going to be a Heisman finalist. Bold prediction from the beginning of this past season, but maybe that's 2026 and not 2025. So I get it, because I think Jonathan Smith is a good coach. I think, again, it's another coach who has a pretty good handle on what he wants and what he needs for his roster to be successful. So I could see it, but I didn't consider them.
Who's your 5 then?
It's Utah. Who it's mostly, it's like, is Kyle Whittingham going to be bad again? I just think he's too good of a coach to have another bad season. And I really like what they're doing on offense. I thought the hire of Jason Beck as offensive coordinator from New Mexico has a real chance to be transformative. It's a very different direction for Utah's offense, but it was a hire that I felt like didn't get a ton of publicity when it happened, but I thought it was quite interesting that Kyle Whittingham chose to go in that direction, and then to bring Devin Dampier with him to be the quarterback who I think will run that system at least for a year is pretty intriguing. And they lose a lot on defense, but I'm going to trust Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley to put a good defense on the field. And I think there's an opportunity for the bones of that defense to still be pretty good. They have impact guys coming back at all 3 levels. They are replacing a lot, but defensive line, linebacker, secondary, I think there's Logan Fano is back on at defensive line. Lander Barton is back at linebacker. Was it Teo Johnson, the safety, is back. Smith Snowden, the cornerback, is back. So there are guys there that I think can be the foundation for a good defense as they continue to develop players. But Utah always develops players really well. So I think I'm not trying to put everything that's happened to Utah over the last couple of years squarely on the shoulders of Cam Rising, but I do think his presence and lack of availability and some of the weirdness there was not great for anybody. And I'm wondering if that's in the rear view now, is there a little bit of juice in that program again? And I think the energy of Kyle Whittingham wanting to go out a winner could have positioned Utah to make a move this year. So they were 5-7 this past season, lost 7 games in a row until they got the win in the regular season finale. Whether or not this is the last season for Kyle Whittingham, I don't know, but I just can't imagine him going out a loser. So I think they could make a jump.
Yeah. You want a playoff game at Utah? Anybody up for that? That'd be fun. Anybody have fun in a playoff game at Utah? We'd do that. So that's why. So Illinois, Utah, BYU, Michigan State, Kansas State. Who's my other one? Oh, Nebraska. Those are the banners you can see. There's one more banner that's sticking out that you can't really see that I wonder if you considered them. They did not 5. Did you consider Iowa?
I think they're losing too much on defense.
Okay, because let me bring this up, because here we are in a situation where the national title game is 2 Northern teams starting new transfer quarterbacks. And Riley Leonard and Will Howard dropped in to help lead this season. And by the way, happened in Indiana with Curtis Work. It happened at Oregon with Dylan Gabriel. It kind of is like the thing that a lot of people did this year. Penn State, really the only Northern team that didn't go about it like that. So I tried to look at, and we've had some portal discussions on other shows, the Northern programs that probably are going to start a new transfer quarterback. And there were so many this year, it doesn't feel like there are a lot. for 2025. So then I was trying to think like, well, who's that team? Who's the playoff team who's going to be spurred by a transfer quarterback the way Oregon, Indiana, Notre Dame, and Ohio State were this year? So here are the options. Mark Gronowski at Iowa, Danny O'Neill, Billy Edwards as 2 transfer quarterbacks at Wisconsin, Preston Stone at Northwestern. Purdue is going to have somebody. I guess it's Malachi Singleton, the Arkansas transfer at the moment, but we're not having a Purdue playoff conversation. If anybody in the country would have it, it would be us. We're not going to have it. Mikey Keene at Michigan as the Fresno State transfer, if he's the guy until Underwood is ready. That could happen. Fernando Mendoza at Cal, as we talked about, to Indiana, but Indiana already made the playoffs, so it doesn't really fit here. Ricky Collins feels like he's going to be the guy at Syracuse, former LSU big-time recruit. Doesn't really have any experience, so like that really is totally different than a Kyle McCord, Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, Riley Leonard, Curtis Rourke situation where you're bringing in an experienced starter. So I don't think that really fits it for being the guy at Syracuse. Or Devin Dampier at Utah. He might be. I think Gronowski at Iowa and Dampier at Utah might be the best Northern models of this thing that works so well in the North this year. But I agree with you about Iowa. They're losing Jay Higgins, one of the best linebackers in Iowa history. They're losing Jamari Harris in the secondary. They're losing Sebastian Castro in the secondary. I think they kept some of their guys up front. They're losing Caleb Johnson, who was a game-breaking running back. Like that, it really, and this happens all the time in college football. It's like, man, they could have used Mark Gronowski this year because Mark Gronowski with what he did at South Dakota State. If you put him on Iowa this year, maybe Iowa would have been right there with Indiana this year. But now they got the quarterback, but they might be too. Now, you also believe in Phil Parker and their depth of talent on the defensive side of the ball. But man, Jay Higgins was good. So the defensive losses kept me from picking Iowa too.
Yeah, but I think they're, especially if Gronowski is good this year, and as we talked about when they got him, stabilizes this position for Iowa. They're in that second tier with the ability to elevate every year. I think I'd put them there. I just don't know if this is that year.
Because I said this is like we're trying to predict basically the next 5 Northern teams to make the playoff. So we're probably not going to have 5 new Northern teams make the playoff in 2025. So this is also like, I think they're going to make the playoff in 2026. That would have been a very reasonable, smart thing to think. That's actually not how I thought. I really just tried to think of 5 teams for next year. But there are other teams out there. I almost would make a list, Landis, of like in the 12-team playoff, how many of our 28, and this would be a mean thing to do, can't think about the playoff?
No, but I think that's because I don't think we've actually, have we done this yet? We've done so many shows. I can't remember if we've actually done it. We definitely talked about it, which was like defining expectations for all 28 teams.
Yes.
So that's that conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because even like you look at Northwestern, it's like Northwestern, like for real. You're going to be talking about the playoff. It's like, you mean the Northwestern team that made the Big Ten title game twice in 3 years or whatever, a couple years ago? They couldn't find a way to go 10-2, depending if they get the right schedule and they get in a guy like Preston Stone at quarterback and some stuff clicks. Like, is that seriously impossible? Is it? Because like one of the teams that you might put high on the list right now would be Cincinnati. And you mean the team that just made the playoff? Mm-hmm. Right. So, I mean, like, how many like impossibilities are there for our 28 teams that in the next 5 years, like, it's impossible? You're not going to make the playoff in the next 5 years.
Maybe one.
Yeah, we can say it. And we like the Barry Odom hire, but it's probably it starts at Purdue because just the way they've bottomed out and they lost 30 guys in the portal, and you just don't know which way they're going to go. But everybody else, like you can sort of see there's been enough hope at so many other programs that you can see the way, if the schedule breaks the right way, you can see their way to 10-2. And if you can see your way to 10-2, you're in the conversation.
I'm thinking of like categories. Because I think there's just like hopeless. Like, why would you even think about it? I think there's like the dare to dream category, which is what you just talked about.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's like if you want to talk about like that second tier within that, there's like you're lingering on the conversation, but maybe even above that, there's like a lingering plus where it's like you can really And then there's the Penn States and Ohio States of the world.
Lingering Plus is like our side channel where you go to get like the real KOTN content. That's where we go say the stuff we can't say on this show. That's on Lingering Plus. It gets dark over there. Little blue. Ooh. Now Landis is really going to tell you what's up. So make your categories. Make sure you wrote those categories down, and we'll address them in our, because I think it's so important, right? We agree on that. Setting expectations so you know when to be happy and when to be mad.
Mm-hmm.
It really is not that college fans, for the most part, I think, know their own programs inside and out. Sometimes they're lacking in context because they don't pay attention to the other teams. And so sometimes it's like, I know you're mad, but actually that was pretty good because look what's happening over here. So I think if we can add some context to that, I think setting expectations is a great off-season discussion. All right. You good? We got our lists of 5. We were the same on 4 of them. We share a brain. But I will predict that one of the 9 teams that we mentioned here today will make the playoff in 2025.
I think so too.
Okay,
we should put a wager on all 9.
No, that'd be good. I told you I did my wager on the national championship game. Did you hear me say that? Did I tell you that?
I don't think so.
The thing I said of bet $5 each on a national championship game pairing, and I hit everything with Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame. Those 4 possibilities, and I got 17-1 on Ohio State, Notre Dame.
Is this a safe space? Can I bet something?
Yeah.
I placed a bet on Notre Dame to win the national title at 22-1 in November, and I cashed out.
Oh, you did cash out?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's a lot. 22-1 is a lot. So you didn't your betting app just gave you an option to cash out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what were the odds you cashed out at? Like 12-1? I
can't remember. No, I guess it would have been I don't know. I bet $10 and I cashed out at $50 or whatever that is.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's not as high. Yeah, but still. But that's dinner. You cashed out at free dinner to 1. It's not bad. All right. When we come back, what you watching? What you buying for dinner with your $50? What you thinking next on Kings of the North? Lesmerises, Bill Landis back. Thanks to the live audience that joined us at a different time. Here today, plan is to be back in that noon Eastern live YouTube window on Thursday when we will go through how Notre Dame and Ohio State got here. And then again, we're planning. So we gave you a show Tuesday, Wednesday, it's today, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So that's 7 days of shows leading into the national championship game. Post-game show live from Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Monday night. Wrap-up show Tuesday morning, probably before noon, because they're going to have a champions press conference on Tuesday morning, and we'll go to that. And then I think probably come in pretty quick on the heels of that. And then we might disappear for a couple of days. Give you guys a little chance to absorb everything, and then we'll get into a full off season of Northern football. But for now, Bill Landis, what have you been watching?
I've been watching this was on TV I think a few years ago, but it's on Netflix now in its entirety, and I had started watching it I think closer to when it was actually on TV but never finished it, so I just started it over again. Designated Survivor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Which, like, the first season is incredible, but like now I'm in the middle of the second season, it's like I don't really care anymore. They figured they solved the first season. And frankly, I'm not that interested in watching Kiefer Sutherland govern. Like that's not why I signed up for this show. I signed up to figure out, who made him the designated survivor in the first place. I thought the first season I think is like pretty excellent. Like it's not like whatever. It's not the most well written thing I've ever seen, but like it's pretty good. I think cliffhangers and action and a well thought out sort of like suspenseful kind of story about an attempt to throw over the American government in a way that like I don't know that I've seen told before. But then they decided they needed more seasons after the first one. So I don't know if it's something that I'll stick with, but I think the first season maybe you watch like the first season and like the first 2 episodes of the second season, and then I think you can stop if you want to. But I would recommend those first 16 episodes of television, I think, for anybody who wants to watch a bit of a thriller. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah. Maggie Q in that is awesome.
Yeah.
She's like the FBI person trying to track down what really happened. But yeah, to go from Kiefer Sutherland being like, they killed everybody, so I have to be president, to I have to figure out this trade deal with China is like not the same thing.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's like, it's okay. It's been like if there was a sequel to Air Force One where like Harrison Ford was just like I don't know, going to NATO meetings, right? It's like nobody wants to watch that.
Yeah. So 2 things. One is, where are you on the whisper talking? Because Kiefer Sutherland does not say a single line in a normal voice that entire show. He whisper talks everything,
or he screams. Yeah, he whisper he whisper talks or he screams. I don't mind the whisper talk as long as he's the only one doing it. If it was a whole series of whisper talking, like if everyone doing it,
that's true.
I'd find that off-putting. But if it's just like one guy and everyone else talks normally, it's okay.
Now I'm going to tell you something terrible, but it affects my viewing of it because I felt it, and you're going to feel it unless you already know this. But you know the guy who plays Aaron Shore? Like the Aaron, right? I thought he was a really good actor.
Yeah.
And I thought I was like, I think the guy has a chance to be something. He died.
Oh.
The actor died of cancer.
That is sad.
It's terrible.
That is terribly sad. I also thought he was good. And also in the middle of the first season, he started speaking Spanish. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
This guy's Spanish. Yeah. Nice.
I thought that guy was going to be like a superstar. He got cancer when he was 42, and it was terrible, which is just like, this is no, I do that. I don't know why I did that, but we do this. This is like a story. My dad passed away a few years ago, but there was a time when my dad, I think I've told the story in a podcast before, like he called me on the phone and he was like, remember Stu from Little League? He was on your team in 3rd grade when you played for the construction company and you were light blue, and like you played first base and he played second base. And then I think he graduated with you. He had blonde hair. He always was chewing bubble gum. Remember Stu? And I was like, yeah, I remember Stu. And my dad was like, he died. And it was like, it was just like, so anytime that anybody in our family is like building somebody up and trying to describe someone, like to get you to remember them, I assume that's what they're going to say. So like,
yeah, I figured that's where it was going when you asked me that, but
yeah.
No,
so I don't know why I do it.
Actor. Yeah.
But anyway, if you watch that show, just know like that's a great performance by that guy. And so like I really did like it, but also it petered out as much as any show has ever petered out.
And fast too.
Fast.
Well, they just set the bar. They set the bar super high. I think the first season could have been 2 seasons, and maybe that would have helped them. But like they covered a lot of ground in the first season.
Did you watch Homeland when it was on?
I did not watch Homeland. No, that's is that like Claire Danes?
Claire Danes, and the guy from Band of Brothers. Homeland's like that.
The British guy who never plays British people. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
that's like that. And both of these, they really should be 1-season shows. But then the first season is so good, they're like, well, we had like an incredible plot built around this one thing, and then at the end of that season, we solved it or revealed it, and then everybody's like, well, you could make more money if you keep going. It's like, okay, and then whatever they come up with after that is not nearly as good. So I would at least recommend the first season of Homeland. Okay, I went to see Den of Thieves 2, the movie, on Tuesday night. Have you seen Den of Thieves 1?
I was going to ask you. I have not. Have you seen Den of Thieves 1?
I have. I like went back. So I like the Rewatchables podcast that the Ringer does where they talk about old movies. So like they like that movie. So I went back and like watched it on Netflix one time. And so like it's just a bank heist movie. Like it's good. It's like fun bank heist stuff. And Ice Cube's son is in it. O'Shea Jackson Jr. Like he's good. Yeah, he's good. So but this second one, so you know how like bank heists are exciting? Mm-hmm. You know what's not super exciting is planning. a bank heist. So I just want to tell people that this movie is sort of like a heist in the first 10 minutes and then 2 hours of planning and then another one. But they really planned this thing. And I think the thing with Den of Thieves 1 is like it was like bank heist after bank heist, if I remember it correctly. There was so much planning. And I was like, oh, it was fine. I like sitting in the dark and eating popcorn, but it wasn't as exciting as I hoped it would be. So, but I would recommend Den of Thieves 1 if you have not seen that.
I like a heist movie. That's one I would like to watch. I like Gerard Butler. I think he's a little limited, but I think he's good for something like that. Yeah, he's good for something like that.
He's gruff. Gruff is all get out. All right, what you eating?
I think you before have talked about Oxby's, right? Because you appreciate the way they transport their French fries. It's a chicken wing place that it's in Columbus, but I think it's other places too. I had I really like their wings. I think they make it like a really good chicken wing because they don't bread them. I don't like breaded wings. But they fry them. I like just a regular wing with like regular chicken wing skin, I guess, but then like that is fried well, so like you still get that crispiness. So they do a good job with that. But they have a spicy garlic wing there that I had the other day.
Ooh,
that was quite good. And I don't know. I've had like garlic parm wings and I've had a billion buffalo wings in my life, but I don't think I've ever had the two flavors combined. And it works. It works really well.
Okay.
I recommend it.
Yeah. Because not every place will every place combine your flavors for you if you ask nicely. Or some places I don't know if they even do it.
I think most will, but this wasn't like, can I combine this and this? It was already on the menu as spicy garlic. So like it came pre-combined.
Did you get fries in the wonderful cardboard packaging that keeps them crispy?
Waffle fries. Yeah.
Did you note it when you walked in? Did you say, we talk about this on a podcast?
I did. I thought it in my head, like, should I say something to somebody? But I'm sure the guy who was working by himself that day didn't care.
Yeah, no, I know. It's always like, please tell corporate that this packaging, and the guy's like, can I please just give you your food and get you to shut up? But I am definitely, I'm old enough now that I probably would do that. I'm worried. The thing I'm going to say, I'm worried I've already said on the show. I think I already talked about the conveyor belt sushi. Did I talk about conveyor belt sushi on here with the robot?
Talked about conveyor belt sushi.
Because I saw, it's like we have a conveyor belt sushi. Then I saw a conveyor belt sushi somewhere else also. So I'll just say this. Sometimes, do you like Mexican food? You're into Mexican food? You enjoy Mexican food? Mm-hmm. I love all Mexican food, all the different things. But I was there with at a Mexican restaurant the other day. And sometimes I really just want ground beef in a hard shell taco. Mm-hmm. I'm like that. I don't do it much, but it's the OG. It's like how we got here, how we have all these wonderful Mexican restaurants. And I do think there's some places you can't. It's harder to get a hard shell taco now sometimes, but I prefer the hard shell to the soft shell, and it just hit, man. So shout out to the original hard shell taco. Sometimes it's just exactly what you need. And I get it. There's brisket and there's carnitas and there's all kinds of things. Sometimes this good old ground beef is where it's at, brother.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how prominent a hard shell taco is in like authentic Mexican cuisine. Maybe it's very prominent. It's like the same thing with, I think, like, I don't know. Can you like go to Beijing and get General Tso's chicken? I don't think like it's like Americanized versions of those foods that I think maybe the hard shell taco with the seasoned beef lands.
Which is what I want. It's the Epcot version of everything. I don't want anything actually authentic. I want like the Americanized glaze over everything because I'm just an American. I am what I am. I don't know what to tell you. I wish I was more adventurous in everything that I do, but just please Americanize it. So yeah. God bless whoever decided, what if we just, I know what you guys are doing, but I got some people back here. I don't know if they can handle it. What about a hard shell with some ground beef? All right. What are you thinking about?
I think I have expressed my fear of this before, but then it finally happened the other day. I was watching the Eagles game and there was a play where Jalen Hurts for some reason like rolled out and he slid but he slid like right into the back leg of Lane Johnson, the Eagles like future Hall of Famer right tackle, like in a way where like if a player on another team did it, you would think like it was one of the dirtiest plays you've ever seen. But I think like Jalen Hurts just like wasn't paying attention to what he was doing, and he slid into the back of his own teammate, and he did it. And I yelled, "What the F are you doing?"
Oh,
and then my 2-year-old son turned around and said that right back to me.
Yeah, he did.
So now I was worried. I was worried about having to change the way I talk around him, and now I definitely have to change the way I talk around him because he repeats everything we say.
That is, I mean, it's the greatest compliment. You know, you and your wife are his heroes. He wants to emulate everything you do, but man, you got to be you, man. Come on, you got to be you, Landis. What are you gonna do? You gonna change who you are? Maybe you just need to have a swearing 2-year-old.
Maybe. He also, when he says the word frog, it sounds like he's dropping an F-bomb. So maybe we can just tell people that he's saying frog when he says it.
Yeah. What the frog, Jalen Hurts? What the frog? Maybe you can just say what the frog, Jalen Hurts. And then that'll solve all the problems.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
You know what I found to be a very good substitute swear word? Because I think like sometimes you just need to hit certain like syllables and sounds, right? In a swear word, monkey is a good swear word if you're looking for replacements.
Yeah,
I say mother of monkey a lot. Mother of monkey, right? Because like because it feels the right way, you know.
Yeah.
So
it's the hard K. Yeah, the hard K.
Yeah, the hard K. The hard K is where it's at. So here's the thing I'm thinking about, and it's not as much what I'm thinking about. It's like it's what is happening. Is we are going to cut my dog's leg off, and we're not going to do it in our house, but our dog has cancer in her paw, in one of the bones in her leg. My wife is probably in the comments talking about how I'm explaining this incorrectly. And so to keep the cancer from spreading, she's going to have her right front leg amputated tomorrow. And then we're going to have a 3-legged dog. And the vet says, dogs handle it great. Dogs, like the pain will be gone, and the dog actually will prefer being 3-legged. And my thing that I would say back is, how do you know? Like, that's an easy thing to say. Oh, dogs love getting their leg cut off. It's the best thing for them. It's like, is anyone really asking? So it's been quite an ordeal. We are glad it is a way that can help our dog who has this situation. But I got to be honest, Landis, I'm not sure I ever thought I'd be the kind of person who would have a 3-legged dog, because I'm not really a dog person. I just happen to live in a home of dog people. So that's what happens. And it's fine, but it is crazy. And so the dog is going to go to the vet Thursday, be overnight. My wife's going to drive me to the airport on Friday, and before the dog comes home. So then, and then I'm going to be gone for a while. So then, like, I'm not going to be home for like a week. And then when I finally get back, there's going to be a 3-legged dog in my house. That tragic?
I've seen plenty
of crazy dogs. You've seen?
I've seen 3-legged dogs. They're fine.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine's dog, he had cancer in his eye, and they just removed his eye. He walks around as a one-eyed dog.
Yeah. So stuff happens. So John's asking, Tasia is 12 and a half, and she's like a German Shepherd Retriever mix. Old mixed breed dog. A lot of lab, some shepherd. So this is what my wife is saying in the comments. So anyway, I'm not like asking. I mean, she's lived a long, healthy life, and now she's going to live a,
but she's just a lounging around
3-legged
dog, right?
life. At this point, totally a lounging around dog. Yeah. So
she's cool.
Enough. Yeah. Enough for that. Yeah. She has enough legs to lounge. So anyway, crazy. So maybe I'll show a picture of my 3-legged dog once we have the dog with 3 legs. And then I don't think we get to keep the leg, but I think that would be interesting if we did. Yeah.
You could put it on the mantle.
Hanging up here. Also, it's one of those things when a dog has to have surgery, it's not free. There are other ways to do this. I haven't been asked, but bite on this. Here comes this. Here comes a sword. Anyway, it's not funny, but I'm glad there's a solution. So good luck to our lovely dog. Your dog all good? Your dog's good, right?
Yeah, she was just barking at somebody, but otherwise she's good. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right, that'll wrap it up. We appreciate everybody who hung around for this later time slot. The plan is to be back at noon Eastern on Thursday, noon Eastern on Friday, 2 Eastern on Saturday, 1 Eastern on Sunday, noon Eastern on Monday. You can find us wherever on your podcast feed. You can, if you miss us live on YouTube, you can come back and find us. Mike Kadek, the Indiana Center, will join us later in the week. Tishu will check in with some betting advice for the national championship game, and Landis and I will keep breaking down Ohio State, Notre Dame. We just want to take a little break on that, Landis, today for all our other fans of all other northern teams. But tomorrow's going to be really heavy on how Ohio State and Notre Dame made this happen. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Mike Yorostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Thanks to you guys for being here. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.